So yeah, the security angle today has become much stronger than before, especially since the present administration is trying to distance itself from the United States. But Japan also is aware of this, so there is actually a close this intersection of the two countries' interests here. So Japan needs the Philippines in this strategic sense. They, in fact, took the Philippines in World War II because of the strategic position of the Philippines. Now, many of Japan's ships pass through Philippine waters, bringing oil and other strategic materials to Japan. So the Philippines is very important to Japan in terms of the security issue. Of course, the Philippines also is turning to Japan because the Philippine Armed Forces at present is not capable of defending the Philippines against a major external threat. So this is a kind of alliance caused by it's by the situation. It may not be a permanent alliance, but it is due to current pressures from mainland China, from other sources perhaps. So it is one that seems to be the simplest solution. In moving away from the US, then Japan is a close ally, and so that's why recently we've been seeing Japanese forces coming here, joint patrols, joint exercises. This had not been done earlier. So to what extent we will get, how close we will get from here, I don't know yet. We have just received these 2 training planes from Japan, and we have been receiving visits by high-profile Japanese vessels also. And so the Japanese security presence has been increasing. It will probably never be the same level as the American security presence because the Japanese are still bound by the Constitution. But one sees the Philippine and Japanese interests dovetailing at this point. Yes, well, it has its advantages and it has its disadvantages. Advantages in the sense that yes, we should keep our lines of communications open to all countries, and China being very close to us and a major power in this area, we should open up closer relations with the Chinese. Maybe not adversarial relations. We should be more communicative. We should have more diplomatic relations with them. The problem with the Chinese, the relations with the Chinese, is that we have very few Chinese specialists. I think that is the one thing that we have to develop, because without China specialists, we don't know exactly how they think. In terms of Japan, we have more Japan specialists, people who've studied in Japan, who understand how the Japanese think. And the important thing that would be that these specialists should not turn too pro-Japanese or too pro-Chinese. They should be pro-Filipino above all. So the Philippine interests must be seen first and foremost. So I think we have, but even our Japanese specialists, we don't have enough of them. But the Chinese specialists, I think we have much fewer, because again, our relationship with China has not been that strong in terms of, I mean, economically it's been strong, but in terms of diplomatic relationship, really negotiating with them in detail and in Chinese, we lack people who can do that. In Japan, we do have people who can do that, but insofar, so the question is here, how well do we understand the Chinese? So it's good to say yes, we want to deal with them, we want to talk with them, but it has to be we have to do it on our terms. We have to know what we want. It cannot, again, in the case of Japan, will it become a case of, oh, we'll cater to their interests, will be more friendly to them than we are to ourselves. So will we again forget our heroes while becoming more friendly to them just because we want tourists and money to come in? So I think the bottom line is really, okay, we can rebalance our relationship with other countries in the world, but what is number one is really, what will we get out of it? And that we have to remain on top. And so we should know what we want out of this. It's not a sense of trying this, let's see if it works, let's see if this works. We should have a concrete program, and we should have people who know the countries that well to be able to advise on what to do and speak their language. And so right now, when the Chinese come out with press statements, it's all in Chinese. Who do we have who can really read that and understand the nuances of all of that? So I think we had better cultivate China specialists to really be able to tell us this is what they're really saying. Because as of now, we only rely on the English translations. Yeah, actually, in one way, you can actually see that the administration potentially can play one off with the other. So that way, neither side will become that strong. So if one side does not do what it's expected to do, you can turn to the other and show that the other side has to fulfill whatever agreement it has had before. This was what Marcos was doing in martial law. He was trying to play the U.S. off with others. But again, the problem with martial law was the vision was more focused on the presidency, and it was not, the idea was good, but the actual way it was carried out was not exactly perfect. So again, here it should be Japan and China can be seen as friends of the Philippines. But again, it probably should not be one versus the other, but it should be creating a community of nations, perhaps. Yeah. Well, in the near future, I think the relationship will broaden up still further. I do think, okay, yes, there is a good sense of trust between the Philippines and Japan, and it also works the other way. But again, insofar as Japan is concerned, Japan has her own interests at stake. And in fact, I was there last month, and we were talking about Japan, Asia, and globalization. And one issue that was raised was the one very disturbing issue in Japan right now would be the revisionism of their history. And so if in the Philippines we are complaining about revisionism in the martial law history, Japan has been moving towards revisionism in World War II history. Also, the conservative elements have become very strong in the Japanese government, especially under Prime Minister Abe, and that whatever liberal trends there had been in the 1990s are now slowly being undone. The comfort women, for example, are no longer in Japanese textbooks, and the way the war is being explained in Japanese textbooks is different from the more open way it was dealt with in the 1990s. So we were looking at some of this, and it seemed quite dangerous actually, when you see that the government is becoming more and more conservative. When I studied in Japan, the first years, it was not necessary to have flag ceremony all the time. The flag or the national anthem, you didn't have that played in schools. In the 1990s, that became standard, and it became punishable for you not to obey that. So what we saw is a stronger nation building attempt. And that's all right, because you do have to establish strong national symbols. But the way the rightist groups are moving now, it's becoming quite dangerous. I see it as quite dangerous actually. Although there is another problem with Japan at this point, and that is the declining population, the aging population in Japan. And so even if right now they're building bigger warships and they're spending more money on the military budget, the aging population is going to cause the problem of who's going to be in the army if all these people are young. The young people are getting fewer in number, and nobody wants to go to war. And so in fact, when you look at the aging population, this is why many universities have opened up to foreign students. and they're opening classes in English to cater to foreign students because the number of Japanese students has been declining in the last few years. So Filipinos I know have, some of my friends have gone to Japan to study, and they come back not knowing Japanese because they studied in English. The courses were all in English. And that was just so that they could be competitive. And this is, again, I think it's an issue of globalization as well, that, you know, the Japanese universities have to stand up and be included in the top 10 or the top 100 worldwide universities. And so the parameters that they're fulfilling for that include internationalization, English, PhDs abroad, and all of this. And so, you know, it's in a sense, I'd say Japan is in a state of flux. So I don't know exactly where it's going at this point. It's hard to predict at any point. Just as one might say, also the Philippines is in a state of flux at this point, given the administration here. So we don't know exactly where it's going either. So the thing is, I think what will transcend that would be, I still think there are strong people-to-people connections between Japan and the Philippines. And so while the governments may change, again, considering how many Filipinas have married into Japanese families and how many Japanese friends have been made, how many friendships have been made, and now that Japan has been more open also in terms of granting visas, the number of Filipinos going to Japan has increased very largely. So many people are going to Japan now. See the tourist spots. There are also Japanese coming here as well. But how deep are those relations? Time will tell. So again, I'd like to think that we are still in a state of flux, and it's difficult to predict, except that I think on the people-to-people relationship, you will have people on both sides being interested in each other and in each other's countries.